When successful architect Sophia Chen gets cornered by her family about being single at a high society charity gala, she makes a desperate choice that changes everything. In a moment of panic, she claims she's dating her biggest rival billionaire, tech mogul Alexander Cain. What she doesn't expect is for him to play along with her lie, or for their fake relationship to become dangerously real. Welcome back, dear friends and story lovers. Tonight, we bring you a tale where love is tested, secrets come to light, and fate takes an unexpected turn. Every moment will pull you in deeper, and every choice could change everything. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and if this story touches your heart, subscribe, share it with someone who believes in true love, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter. The crystal ballroom of the Meridian Hotel blazed with 1,000 points of light, but Sophia Chen felt like she was drowning in their brilliance. Her emerald silk dress clung to her shoulders like a second skin, chosen specifically to project confidence she didn't feel. At 28, she had clawed her way to the top of the architectural world, designing buildings that scraped the sky and won awards that lined her office walls. Yet here, surrounded by the suffocating perfume of old money and older expectations, she felt like a child again. "Sophia, darling," Aunt Margaret's voice cut through the champagne-soaked air like a blade wrapped in velvet. "When are you going to bring someone special to meet us?" The question landed like a physical blow. Sophia's fingers tightened around her champagne flute, the crystal stem threatening to snap. Behind Margaret, her mother's approving nod confirmed what Sophia had long suspected: this interrogation had been orchestrated. "I'm focused on my career right now," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than her hands. The familiar anxiety clawed at her chest, that suffocating sensation that always came when her personal life became public entertainment. "Career is wonderful, dear," Mrs. Patricia Hawthorne interjected, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You're not getting any younger. My nephew Jonathan just returned from Harvard Business School. Very accomplished, very handsome." The walls of the ballroom seemed to close in. 3 years of awards, groundbreaking designs, and professional recognition meant nothing in this glittering prison of social expectations. Sophia's achievements were invisible here, worthless, without a man to validate them. Actually, the word escaped before her brain could intervene. "I am seeing someone." The silence that followed was deafening. 3 pairs of predatory eyes fixed on her, hungry for details that didn't exist. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized she had just painted herself into a corner with no escape. How wonderful. Margaret's hands clasped together like a prayer answered. "Who is he? Do we know him? When do we get to meet this mystery man?" Panic flooded Sophia's system. Her eyes swept the crowded ballroom, searching desperately for any plausible candidate. Successful men in expensive suits filled the space, but claiming any random stranger would only create more problems. That's when she saw him. Alexander Cain stood near the marble bar like a king surveying his kingdom. 32, he commanded the kind of attention that bent reality around him. His black hair was perfectly styled. His custom tuxedo fit like armor, and his steel-gray eyes held the confidence of a man who had never heard the word no and meant it. He was devastating, powerful, and absolutely the last person on earth Sophia would ever willingly claim. They had been enemies since college, where his arrogance had collided with her determination in spectacular fashion. He had questioned her abilities in front of their entire engineering class, dismissing her innovative designs as pretty but impractical. She had spent 4 years proving him wrong. Their professional paths had crossed multiple times since, always with the same result: sparks flying and tempers flaring. But desperate times demanded desperate measures. Alexander Cain was the only man in the room whose status would stop her family's interrogation cold. He was successful, single as far as she knew, and absolutely the last person anyone would expect her to date. "Alexander Cain," she said, the name tasting like danger on her tongue. "I'm dating Alexander Cain." The effect was instantaneous. Margaret's eyes widened to impossible proportions. Mrs. Hawthorne gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Even her mother looked stunned. "The Alexander Cain?" Margaret whispered as if speaking too loudly might shatter the illusion. "Billionaire tech mogul?" The one on Forbes last month? Yes, Sophia confirmed, her voice gaining strength even as her knees threatened to buckle. We've been keeping it private because you know how complicated things get when too successful. People from competitive industries start dating. As if summoned by the universe's cruel sense of humor, Alexander Cain himself began walking in their direction. Sophia watched in horror as his confident stride brought him closer, his presence seeming to bend the very air around him. Conversations quieted as people noticed his approach. He moved with predatory grace, completely at home in this world of wealth and influence. When his steel-gray eyes met hers, she saw a flicker of surprise cross his features before his expression returned to polite neutrality. "Good evening, ladies," Alexander said as he reached their group, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of charm and authority that had made him a formidable businessman. Alexander. Margaret practically sang his name. Perfect timing. Sophia was just telling us about your relationship. Sophia watched confusion flash across Alexander's face. For a moment that stretched like eternity, she was certain he would expose her lie right there in front of everyone. Her reputation, her family's respect, her carefully constructed professional image would all crumble in an instant. But then, something shifted in his expression. His steel-gray eyes met hers, and she saw the exact moment when understanding dawned. A slow smile spread across his face, not his usual arrogant smirk, but something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. "I hope you haven't been sharing all our secrets," he said smoothly, stepping closer and placing a gentle hand on the small of her back. The touch sent lightning through Sophia's nervous system. Alexander's hand was warm and steady against the silk of her dress, possessive in a way that made her breath catch. His cologne, subtle but intoxicating, wrapped around her like a dangerous promise, of course, darling, Sophia managed, the endearment feeling foreign on her lips when directed at her longtime rival. "I was just explaining how we wanted privacy while we figured things out." Alexander's thumb traced a small, almost unconscious circle on her back, and Sophia had to fight to keep her expression neutral. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the way he said our secrets with such natural warmth, made her heart skip beats she couldn't afford to miss. "Very wise," Margaret nodded approvingly. "Young love should be cherished and protected, but this is such wonderful news. We must celebrate properly soon." "Absolutely," Alexander agreed, his voice carrying just the right amount of affection. "Perhaps when we're ready to make things more official?" As the conversation flowed around them, Sophia marveled at how effortlessly Alexander had slipped into the role. He answered questions with perfect detail, deflected probing inquiries with charming humor, and maintained that gentle, possessive touch that made everyone believe they were witnessing genuine affection. When Margaret and Mrs. Hawthorne finally excused themselves to spread the news, Sophia and Alexander found themselves alone for the first time since the deception began. "Well," Alexander said quietly, his hand still resting on her back, "that was interesting." Sophia turned to face him, fully expecting mockery or anger. Instead, she found something that looked almost like amusement mixed with curiosity. "Alexander, I can explain," she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "No need," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Family pressure can be overwhelming, especially when you're successful in your own right, but still single." The understanding in his voice surprised her. She had expected confrontation, demands for explanations, maybe even public humiliation, as payback for years of rivalry. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it more than she had ever meant anything. "I don't know why you went along with it, but thank you." Alexander studied her face for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers. "Maybe because I know exactly how it feels to have people assume your personal life should match your professional success." In that moment, something shifted between them. The years of rivalry, the professional animosity, the careful distance they had always maintained seemed less important than this shared understanding of the pressures they both faced. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, genuinely uncertain. Alexander's smile was different this time, less practiced and more real. "Now we dance. Your aunt is watching, and she expects to see her niece happy with her new boyfriend." Before Sophia could protest, Alexander was guiding her toward the dance floor. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic. And couples swayed together under the crystal chandeliers like figures in a snow globe. Alexander's arms encircled her with surprising gentleness. One hand settled at her waist while the other captured her fingers, and suddenly they were moving together as if they had done this 1,000 times before. "You're full of surprises tonight," Sophia said, fighting to ignore how perfectly she fit against him. "You have no idea," Alexander replied, spinning her expertly before pulling her back against his chest. "Tell me, Sophia, what made you choose me? Of all the men in this room, why pick your biggest rival as your fake boyfriend?" The question caught her off guard. "You were the only one whose status would be impressive enough to stop the interrogation," she admitted. "And the last person anyone would expect me to date? Practical and strategic," Alexander murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "I respect that. But you might have just created a bigger problem than you solved." "What do you mean?" Alexander's eyes met hers, and she saw something dark and complicated there. "Your aunt just invited us to Sunday dinner next weekend. She's planning to announce our relationship to the entire family." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "What?" She cornered. "Me while you were in the powder room. Apparently, she's been worried about you for years. And finding out you're dating someone has made her the happiest woman alive. She wants to celebrate properly." The walls were closing in again, but this time Alexander was trapped inside with her. "I'll tell her it's too soon," Sophia said quickly. "We're not ready for family dinners. That might work once, maybe twice. But she's not going to let this go. She sees you happy for the first time in years." Alexander's jaw tightened. "There's something else." "My mother called while you were gone." "Your mother?" "Word travels fast in these circles. She heard about us and wants to meet you. She's flying. And from Paris specifically to have dinner with us this Thursday?" Oh, Sophia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What had started as a desperate lie to escape an uncomfortable conversation was snowballing into something massive and uncontrollable. "This is a disaster," she whispered. Alexander's grip on her waist tightened slightly. "Not necessarily. If we're going to pull this off, we need rules, boundaries, and we need to know each other well enough to be convincing." "What are you suggesting? A real fake relationship?" Alexander said, his voice deadly serious. "We spend time together, learn each other's habits, create a believable backstory. We give our families what they want while protecting ourselves from their expectations. And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "My mother has been trying to set me up with suitable wives since I turned 30. Every business dinner becomes a matchmaking opportunity. Every social event is a parade of potential brides. This would give me the breathing room I need to focus on my work without constantly deflecting romantic ambitions." The music was ending, but neither of them moved to separate. Sophia found herself studying Alexander's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. But all she saw was a man as trapped by expectations as she was. "There's something you should know, Alexander," said quietly as the last notes faded. "About why I really went along with your lie tonight." "What?" His gray eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable there, something raw that made her chest tighten. 3 years ago at the architectural conference in Chicago, I overheard your conversation with James Morrison about your parents' divorce and how it affected your trust in relationships, about how you'd rather be alone than risk that kind of pain. Sophia's breath caught. She remembered that night, remembered breaking down to her colleague after too much wine and too little sleep, like she had thought no one else was listening. "I understood," Alexander continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "because I've been. There are 2 different reasons, same result." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Sophia realized that Alexander Cain, her longtime rival and antagonist, might be the only person who truly understood the walls she had built around her heart. "So we help each other," she said finally. "We help each other," he confirmed. But as they walked off the dance floor together, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just agreed to something far more dangerous than a simple deception. Thursday arrived with Seattle's typical gray drizzle, and Sophia stood outside Le Bernardin, watching water streak down the restaurant's elegant windows. Her hands shook as she checked her phone for the third time. Alexander was already 5 minutes late, and his mother was expecting them in 10. When Alexander finally appeared, sliding out of a black Tesla that materialized at the curb like something from a fever dream, Sophia barely recognized him. Gone was the polished businessman from the charity gala. This Alexander looked haunted, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled as if he had slept in it. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice rough around the edges. Had to handle a crisis at the office. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man who had been drinking, or crying, or both. "Alexander, are you okay?" He stopped walking and looked at her. Really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Have you ever done something you can never take back? Something that changes everything?" The question sent ice through her veins. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," he said quickly, his businessman mask sliding back into place. "Let's go meet my mother." Alexander Cain was nothing like Sophia had expected. Where she had anticipated another Margaret, all polish and social expectations, Alexander's mother was sharp-edged and intelligent, with steel-gray eyes, identical too. Her sons and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "So you're the architect," Eleanor said, after they had ordered. "The one who's been giving my son nightmares for the past decade." "Mother," Alexander warned, but Eleanor waved him off. "I've heard about their rivalry, Sophia. How they've been circling each other like wolves since college. Quite romantic, actually, in a medieval sort of way." Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We've had our professional disagreements." "Professional," Eleanor repeated as if tasting the word. "Is that what we're calling it?" She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, dear, what changed? What made you to finally stop fighting long enough to fall in love?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Sophia glanced at Alexander, who was staring at his untouched wine glass as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Sometimes," Sophia said carefully, "the people who challenge us the most are the ones who understand us best." Eleanor's smile was sharp. "How diplomatic. Alexander, you've been unusually quiet. Usually you can't stop talking about your projects, your acquisitions, your grand plans for world domination. Tonight, you look like a man attending his own funeral." Alexander's head snapped up. "I'm fine, Mother." "No, you're not." Eleanor's voice softened slightly. "I know that look. Saw it on your father's face the night before he left us." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His face went white, and Sophia saw his hands clench into fists under the table. "Excuse me," Alexander said abruptly, pushing back from the table. "I need some air." He was gone before either woman could respond, leaving Sophia alone with Eleanor's penetrating stare. "He didn't tell you, did I?" Eleanor said quietly. "Tell me what? About Tuesday night? About what happened at the board meeting?" Sophia's stomach dropped. "I don't understand." Eleanor sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 60 years. "My son has been living a lie for the past 5 years, Sophia. His company, his success, his entire empire, it's built on stolen technology. He took the core algorithms from his former business partner and buried the evidence so deep that no one could prove it." The restaurant seemed to tilt around Sophia. "Oh, that's impossible. Alexander would never." Tuesday night, his partner's daughter came forward with proof. Digital forensics, communication records, financial trails. Everything Alexander thought he had destroyed. Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "She's threatening to go public unless he pays her $50 million and publicly admits what he did." Sophia felt like she was drowning. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you're really in love with my son, you need to know who he is. And if you're not," Eleanor's eyes narrowed, "then you need to know what you're getting yourself into with this little charade." The words were a gut punch. Sophia stared at Eleanor, realizing that Alexander's mother had seen through their deception from the moment they sat down. Sophia whispered, "I know my son has never brought a woman to meet me. I know he's never looked at anyone the way he's been looking at you for years, even when you two were supposedly enemies. And I know that whatever is happening between you two, It started as something other than love, but might be becoming something real. Before Sophia could respond, Alexander returned to the table. His face was composed, but his eyes were wild. "We should go," he said quietly. "I'm not feeling well." Eleanor studied her son's face. The girl wants an answer by Saturday, doesn't she?" Alexander's composure cracked. "How do you know about that?" "Because I raised you, and I know when you're about to do something stupid and noble." Eleanor reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Running away won't solve this, Alexander. It never does. I'm not running away. I'm protecting the people I care about from the fallout by disappearing, by destroying everything you've built rather than facing the consequences." Alexander's jaw tightened. "The consequences will destroy innocent people. My employees, my investors, anyone associated with me, including Sophia." The revelation hit Sophia like lightning. "You're planning to confess?" "I'm planning to make it right. By sacrificing yourself. By accepting responsibility for what I did." Eleanor was watching this exchange with sharp interest. "And what about her?" she asked, nodding toward Sophia. "What happens to your fake girlfriend when your real life implodes?" Alexander's eyes met Sophia's, and she saw pain there so raw, it took her breath away. "That's why I have to end this. Tonight. Before she gets hurt because of my mistakes." But as Sophia looked at this broken, desperate man who had just revealed the depth of his secrets and his self-sacrifice, she realized something that terrified her more than any scandal. She was falling in love with him. Now she was about to lose him before she had ever really had him. Sophia's apartment had never felt smaller. Alexander sat on her couch, his head in his hands, while she paced the length of her living room like a caged animal. The city sparkled beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows. But the view that usually calmed her now felt like a mockery of normalcy. "Tell me everything," she said for the third time. From the beginning, Alexander looked up at her, his face haggard. "David Park was my roommate at Stanford. Brilliant programmer, terrible businessman. We started the company together, but he wanted to keep it small, boutique. I saw the potential for something bigger. So you stole from him?" "I bought him out. Legally. But the algorithms he developed, the ones that became the foundation of everything I built afterward, he never intended to sell those." Alexander's voice was hollow. "I took them anyway. Buried them in the acquisition paperwork where he'd never think to look." Sophia stopped pacing. And now his daughter found out. Sarah Park. She's a forensic accountant, turned detective when her father died last year and left her his files. She's spent months reconstructing what I did. Alexander stood, moving, to the windows. "She has everything, Sophia. Every email, every document, every financial transfer. She can prove I built my empire on stolen work. What does she want? $50 million and a public confession? Or she goes to the authorities. And the media." Alexander's reflection looked like a ghost against the night sky. "She wants to destroy me the same way I destroyed her father's dreams." Sophia felt something shift inside her chest, a painful recognition. "You're going to pay her?" "I'm going. To confess publicly, take full responsibility and face whatever consequences come. That will ruin you." "Good." Alexander turned to face her, and she saw something broken in his eyes. "Maybe it's time I stopped running from what I am. What you are is not defined by one mistake you made a decade ago." "One mistake?" Alexander laughed bitterly. "Sophia, I've been lying about who I am for so long I've forgotten what the truth looks like. This fake relationship with you is just the latest in a long line of deceptions." The words stung more than they should have. "So this was all just another lie to you?" Alexander moved closer, his eyes intense. "No, that's the problem. Somewhere between the charity gala and tonight, this stopped being fake for me. Exactly why I have to end it." Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "What is it?" Alexander asked. "Text message. From a number I don't recognize." Sophia's hands shook as she read the message aloud. "Ms. Chen, I think you should know who you're really dating. Check your email." Alexander went very still. "Show me." Sophia opened her email with trembling fingers. The message was from Sarah. Park, and it contained dozens of documents, financial records, and a detailed timeline of Alexander's theft. But at the bottom was something that made Sophia's blood turn to ice. "There's a recording," she whispered. The audio file was dated 3 days ago. Sophia recognized the voices immediately. Alexander and Sarah Park, meeting in what sounded like a quiet restaurant. Alexander's voice came through clearly. "What do you want?" Sarah's response was sharp. "Justice for my father. ... But I'm willing to settle for revenge. Name your price." "What? 50 million? And a public confession? Or I destroy everything you've built, including your new girlfriend." Sophia Chen, the architect. "I've done my research on her too. Did you know her firm is up for a major city contract next month? Would be a shame if questions arose about her association with a known corporate thief." Sophia's stomach dropped, but it was Alexander's next words that shattered her completely. "Leave Sophia out of this. She doesn't know anything about my past, and she doesn't deserve to be collateral damage in our war. How noble. But if you don't pay, she becomes collateral damage anyway, unless... Sarah's voice turned calculating. "Unless you're not really dating her at all. Unless this is all just another one of your elaborate deceptions." There was a long pause before Alexander responded, his voice cold and distant. "My relationship with Sophia Chen is a business arrangement. She needed to get her family off her back about being single, and I needed a respectable woman to accompany me to social functions. It's mutually beneficial and completely fake." Sophia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Interesting." Sarah continued on the recording. "So she's just another person you're using. Another victim of your manipulations." "Sophia's not a victim. She knows exactly what our arrangement is. Does she? Because from what I observed at the charity gala, she looked like a woman falling in love." Alexander's silence stretched for an eternity before he finally spoke. "That's her problem, not mine." Sophia's phone slipped from numb fingers, clattering to the floor. She stared at Alexander, who had gone white as bone. "Sophia, I can explain. You told her I was falling in love with you." Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I was trying to protect you, to make her think you didn't matter, so she wouldn't use you against me. By humiliating me? By reducing me to some pathetic woman who was stupid enough to catch feelings for? Man who was just using her? That's not what I meant. But it's what you said." Sophia backed away from him, her heart breaking with each word. "You told a complete stranger that I was falling in love with you, and that it was my problem, not yours." Alexander moved toward her, his hands outstretched. "Sophia, please. You have to understand I was trying to protect you from her. Thought you mattered to me, she would have used you to hurt me. But I didn't matter to you, did I? That's what you told her? That our relationship was fake and I was just another person you were using? I lied to her. Which time? When you told her our relationship was fake? Or when you told me it had become real?" The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Alexander's face crumpled, and Sophia had her answer. "Get out," she whispered. "Sophia, get out." The words ripped from her throat with a violence that surprised them both. Alexander stood frozen for a moment, his face a mask of pain and regret. Then he moved toward the door, stopping only when his hand was on the knob. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I wasn't lying when I said this had stopped being fake for me. But I understand why you can't believe that now." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Sophia sank to the floor as the weight of betrayal crushed down on her. She had been right to build walls around her heart. She had been right to never trust anyone with her feelings. But knowing she had been right didn't make the pain any less devastating. Outside her windows, the city continued to glitter, indifferent to the fact that her world had just collapsed. The press conference was scheduled for noon on Saturday, and Sophia watched it from her office, surrounded by the architectural models that had once been her entire world. Alexander stood at a podium in his company's headquarters, looking like a man facing execution. The media had gathered like vultures sensing blood in the water. She should have felt vindicated, should have felt satisfied that her longtime rival was finally getting what he deserved. Instead, she felt hollow, watching the man she had fallen in love with prepare to destroy himself. I want to address recent allegations about the founding of my company. Alexander began, his voice steady despite the cameras and hostile questions. 10 years ago, I acquired technology from my business partner David Park through means that were legally questionable and morally indefensible. The room erupted in shouting questions, but Alexander continued. I built my success on stolen work, and I've spent a decade living with that guilt. Today, I take full responsibility for my actions. I'm announcing my resignation as CEO and the establishment of a $50 million foundation in David Park's name to support young entrepreneurs. Sophia's assistant knocked on her door. Ms. Chen, there's someone here to see you. Lenore. Cain walked into Sophia's office like she owned it, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, despite the chaos surrounding her son's public downfall. Mrs. Cain, I didn't expect to see you. I imagine not. Eleanor settled into the chair across from Sophia's desk. I wanted to thank you. Thank me. For breaking my son's heart so thoroughly that he finally found the courage to do the right thing. Sophia felt like she had been slapped. I didn't break his heart. He broke mine, did he? Eleanor's steel gray eyes were knowing. Or did you break his when you refused to listen to his explanation? When you threw him out of your apartment without giving him a chance to defend himself? He lied to me. He told Sarah Park that our relationship was fake, that I was just business arrangement to protect you. Alexander has many faults, but he's never been a good liar when it comes to the people he loves, which is why that recording was so obviously a performance for Sarah Park's benefit. Sophia stared at Eleanor, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet again. What are you talking about? My son spent 5 years building an empire on a lie, but 3 days ago, he threw it all away to protect you. He confessed to Sarah Park, gave her everything she wanted on one condition, that she'd leave you alone, that your name never be mentioned. In connection with his scandal, the words hit Sophia like lightning. That's not what happened. She threatened him. She tried to threaten him. But Alexander had already made his decision. He was going to confess, regardless of what Sarah Park wanted, because he realized that loving you meant he couldn't continue living a lie. Eleanor leaned forward. The recording you heard? That was Alexander convincing Sarah that you weren't worth pursuing because you meant nothing to him. He sacrificed his own heart to protect yours. Sophia felt the walls she had rebuilt around, her heart beginning to crumble, but he said, ... He said what he needed to say to keep you safe, just like he's doing right now. Eleanor nodded toward the television where Alexander was still taking questions from the press. He's not just confessing to his crimes, Sophia, making sure that everyone knows you had nothing to do with his past. He's burning down his entire life to keep even a shadow of scandal from touching you. Tears Sophia hadn't allowed herself. Two cry began falling. I told him to leave. I wouldn't listen. Then maybe it's time you went and told him something else. Sophia was already reaching for her keys before Eleanor had finished speaking. The lobby of Alexander's building was chaos. Security guards held back reporters while employees streamed out with their belongings in cardboard boxes. Sophia fought her way through the crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found Alexander in his office, standing at the windows that overlooked the city. His desk was empty, his awards and accolades packed away. He looked smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of his confession. Sophia. He turned when he heard her enter, surprise and wariness warring in his expression. You shouldn't be here. The media will think you're involved. Let them think what they want. Sophia crossed the room until she was standing directly in front. Of him I talked to your mother. Alexander closed his eyes. What did she tell you? Oh. The truth. About what you really told Sarah Park? About why you confessed? Sophia's voice broke. About how you sacrificed everything to protect me. I couldn't let my mistakes destroy you too, you idiot. The words came out fierce and tender at the same time. I was already destroyed the moment I fell in love with you. I was already lost. Alexander's eyes opened, hope flickering there like a candle in the wind. Sophia, I love you, she said, the words falling between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. I love you, and I'm terrified, and I don't know how to do this, but I can't watch you face this alone. Alexander's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. I love you too. God. Sophia, I love you so much it's been killing me. But then why didn't you fight for us? Why did you try to walk away? Because loving you means wanting you to have a life that isn't tainted by my mistakes. You deserve better than being collateral damage in my war with the past. Sophia pressed her hands over his, anchoring him to her. I don't want better. Want you? Flawed and complicated and brave enough to sacrifice everything for love? Alexander's mouth found hers, and the kiss tasted like confession and absolution. Like endings and beginnings, like the truth they had both been too afraid to speak. When they broke apart, the city spread out below them like a promise of possibility. The scandal would pass, the media would move on to other stories, but this moment, this choice to love despite the risk, would endure. What happens now? Sophia asked, her forehead resting against his. Now we figure it out together, Alexander said, his voice steady with newfound certainty. I may have lost everything else, but I found the one thing that actually matters. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the empty shell of what would become Alexander's new company. Not a tech empire this time, but a small consulting firm focused on helping entrepreneurs navigate ethical business practices. The space was modest, nothing like the gleaming tower he had commanded before. But his eyes held a piece she had never seen during his days as a mogul. It's perfect, she said, reviewing the architectural plans they had designed together. We'll be starting from nothing, Alexander warned, but there was excitement in his voice rather than fear. Good, Sophia replied, taking his hand. I like. Building something real from the ground up. They'd learned that love wasn't about perfect people finding each other, but about broken people choosing to heal together. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes, but about having the courage to face the consequences and do better. Outside, Seattle stretched toward the horizon, full of buildings that would outlast their creators, full of dreams that would survive their dreamers. And in this small space, that would become their future. To people who had spent years as enemies, had finally found their way home to each other. I love you, Alexander said, the words no longer carrying the weight of desperate confession, but the quiet certainty of chosen commitment. I love you too, Sophia replied, and for the first time in either of their lives, those words felt like the beginning of something rather than the end.